Well, after a week-long international break, we are finally back to getting a little bit of a preview of the next week of the Fantasy Premier League, and this is a good chance to sort of like take a step back, see how we're getting on. And I've got to be honest, overall, it's not going great for me. The week before the international break, which is 2 weeks ago, we'll do a little bit of a review over that. But overall, yeah, we're yeah really doing badly. This is basically just giving you guys an idea of just how bad things can get for the Fantasy Premier League. But I say that's overall. As a little bit of review of the previous week that we had of game week 7, which is here for me, it actually wasn't too bad. 58 points in total. Didn't really make a difference which goalkeeper we picked. We had 3 points for either one of them. But actually, in terms of the players that we had, wasn't too bad. Actually, wasn't too bad. We had Kudus in our team, who is performing fantastically well for Tottenham Hotspur. Saka and Gabriel also performing well. Pedro Porro getting some good points in. Not too bad. We've got the makings of a good team to keep us going, and even Trofeo getting 5 points for Bournemouth. And actually, in terms of like an overview of the actual matches, win for Bournemouth again, continuing their good form. I think they're even in the top 4. Spurs doing well, so that's one to keep an eye out for. Arsenal doing well against West Ham. We'll talk a little bit more about West Ham and Arsenal later on as well. Man United getting a surprise win over Sunderland. Chelsea getting the win over Liverpool. We'll probably talk a little bit about Liverpool as well. Villa getting the win over Burnley. Everton getting the win over Crystal Palace, which was quite a surprise. Crystal Palace has been playing quite well, so something to keep an eye on there. Newcastle beating Forest. We've definitely got to talk about Nottingham Forest. Wolves and Brighton with a draw there, and Man City getting a win over Brentford. So where does that leave us? Where are we at in terms of what we do next? What moves we make and everything like that. Well, this is where we now start to talk about picking the team. And I haven't made my transfer yet. I have an idea of a transfer to make, but we're going to go through it together. We are going to have a little bit of an idea of basically where we are. And this is now, we're getting to the point where it's not just about looking at the next week. It's seeing if you can almost predict a few weeks in advance. Now, thankfully for us, we've got a decent budget that we can spend on players, so we can start making big changes in the team. We don't have to wait for it to get to 2 transfers, which is brilliant. Okay, so we're going to first look at the next batch of matches. I rhymed there. That was amazing. For the next week, and then we're gonna, like I say, take a little bit further look using the transfers to basically see, is there any teams that we should have a little focus on, that we should have an eye on for starting to bring players in rather than just focusing on next week. So we'll do the focus on the next week first, and here are the game weeks. Now, there are 2 things to bear in mind when it comes to an international week. One of them we'll discuss later, but one of the ones to discuss now is the game week after an international break is normally the one where things go weird. Why do I say that? This is the one where the teams that have been, have built up a really strong tactic, their players have gone off to, their international teams to play internationally for them. And sometimes it takes them a little while to get up to speed. You'll find that, especially for the 12:30 game on the Saturday, Nottingham Forest versus Chelsea one, it's like, it almost feels like they've forgotten how to play football together. It ends up being really weird, really silly, really funny. And the great thing is that when we're going to be doing the live reaction on Saturday to the 3 p.m. games, we've got 6 of those crazy games to be watching, which will be quite interesting. Now, as to the matches themselves, Nottingham Forest versus Chelsea. Let's talk Nottingham Forest. It's not great. I think anyone that... I think anyone that was just a football fan that knows a little bit about football, even if you were in the woods of being Nottingham Forest, in the woods, Forest, never mind. You could have told that if you change from a strategic, defensive, solid manager like Nuno Espirito Santo, and then move to a manager like Ange Postecoglou, who is ultra attacking, ultra high risk, ultra gambler with his teams, it was either going to go incredibly well or a recipe for disaster. Last year Ange Postecoglou was in charge of Tottenham Hotspur, a team that normally finishes in like the top 7 or 8, finishing 17th. You can see how high of a risk that is. So it almost felt like it's not going to end well for Nottingham Forest at all. And they are in a weak spot. They are almost like the team you want to play against. So really, really interesting. Yes, it is at the City ground, at Nottingham Forest's home ground. But I suspect this will be a win for Chelsea. A tight win for Chelsea, but a win for Chelsea nonetheless. Brighton versus Newcastle. Brighton seems to be the type of team that people just keep forgetting about. They have beaten Manchester City. They did get a draw against Wolves, which was a bit of a downer, but well-run team. Well-run team under Hertzler. And Newcastle starting to get good. Starting to come good. I think they play Arsenal. Yes, they lost last minute against Arsenal, but it wasn't too bad. So again, Newcastle, I suspect this one will be tight. Sort of like a 1-1, 2-all sort of thing. Or maybe a tight win for Newcastle at Brighton's home ground. So definitely want to focus on attackers here and midfielders. That's the way I'd look at it. The bizarre game is going to be Burnley versus Leeds. Whenever there's games between two teams that were in the lower division the previous year, this ends up being one of those slugfests. It's basically Burnley's defence against Leeds' attack. So this one is one of those where if you were to pick players from here, and by the way, it'd be a big risk picking players from Burnley Leeds, but you could give a Burnley defender a go. You could give a Leeds attacker a go. Very weird one to call. I think it'll probably be 1-0 to Burnley, something like that. You could be looking at clean sheets of Burnley there. So, one to definitely give a go. Crystal Palace versus Bournemouth. Again, another one of those where you just can't predict. This is one of the things I love about this season. Previous seasons, you would almost have you almost had an idea of where the game was going to go, who was going to win. There's so many of these teams that are on a sort of similar level and similar competitiveness that actually kind of difficult to predict. And Crystal Palace Bournemouth is one of those ones. Bournemouth got an incredible defence and some good attackers in players like Semenyo. We'll talk a little bit more. Crystal Palace, again, Hertzler is organiser boss, right? And has some brilliant attackers. Could be an interesting thing to see with regards to Mateta. There's been a little bit of beef between Mateta and Zaha. Normally that can end up being a situation where does a player have to prove something? Does Mateta have to prove something at Crystal Palace? Could be something to watch out for. Man City Everton, another one to certainly keep an eye out for. Everton are on the way up. Man City are on the way up. Could be a battle. I suspect Man City will win it anyway, but I don't think this is as clear-cut as people might make it out to be. Everton are a little bit hampered in this because Jack Grealish, because he's on loan at Everton from Manchester City, there isn't a rule that's put in place for a lot of players that are on loan that if you are on loan from a club, you can't play against that club. Almost like a respectful thing. So as a result, because Jack Grealish is on loan at Everton from Manchester City, he cannot play against Manchester City. That could work against Everton there, and that's why I think Man City will still get the win. Really, really interesting. Sunderland versus Wolves. Sunderland started really strong, lost against Manchester United. That wasn't great. Wolves been absolutely dreadful, but have got a decent draw against Brighton. This one, I'm still putting my faith in Sunderland here. I think, especially being at the Stadium Light, is going to be a fantastic atmosphere. Brilliant stuff. I can see Sunderland easily getting a win here. But it will, like I say, it still will be tight. I think it'll be like sort of like a 2-1. So definitely Sunderland attackers for that. Now we come to Fulham versus Arsenal. And Arsenal are top of the table. They're looking good. But I don't know. Something about this feels like if there ever is going to be a banana skin type match, a game that Arsenal could drop points, it would be a match like this. Let me explain my reasoning. First things first, it is a London matchup. Fulham are from West London, Arsenal are from North London. There sometimes ends up being a bit of beef between two London clubs. Fulham might want to prove themselves, and especially as it being Fulham at home, especially that, could mean that it might be a challenge for Arsenal. And the second one is this. Fulham is one of those teams that it is easy for people to forget about. Now, that might sound like an insult, but you do end up getting these teams where they almost, it's like, don't you dare forget about me. And Fulham seems to be one of those teams. They are well organised. They've got some brilliant players. I think I've spoken about Fulham's players 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And they'll do this thing where they'll be like quietly working away, getting decent points, decent wins in the background, and you forget about it until they play against a big team. Fulham could be one of those ones. Arsenal, if they are to prove that they are a winning machine, capable of winning the title, this is the type of match they need to win. So, could be tight. I mean, I'm saying this as a Liverpool fan, so there might be a little bit of bias in this, but I genuinely think we could be looking at a draw here. I don't know why. I just get the feeling of a draw here, and it's weird for me to say Arsenal are brilliant, Saka's back, all the players are performing well, but yeah, could be an interesting one. Tottenham Hotspur versus Aston Villa. Again, we're in a similar situation. Tottenham Hotspur started brilliantly, starting to drop off. Aston Villa started terribly, starting to pick up. I still think Spurs will win this, but not as easily as expected. So maybe like sort of like a 2-1. We'll skip over the next one because we've got big talking points to talk about. Let's talk about West Ham versus... Actually, no, do you know what? No, there's a big talking point for West Ham versus Brentford. So we will go on to Liverpool Man United as well. Man United, based on form, I think are doing better than Liverpool right now on form, like the past 4 matches. But this is still an interesting one, a challenging one. But let's address Liverpool's situation. What do you do as a fantasy Premier League manager for Liverpool players? The honest truth is, I don't know. There's been a lot of discussions and things like that in terms of how Arne Slot will lay out Liverpool and everything like that. But you've got a lot of big names. This time last year, Salah was a done deal. It was like, if you're not picking Salah, you're not winning anything, right? But we're not in that season anymore. Salah's not no longer the one main guy. They've got Wirtz, they've got Isak, they've got Ekitike, Cody Gakpo's performing well. You've got Szoboszlai. You've got all these players that you can't fit them all into the team. And they all have this idea of being their own big guy sort of thing. So this could be the one to keep an eye out for. Could be the one where see if we can work out how Liverpool are going to play. And here's the thing, in terms of risks, I don't know who to pick in terms of a risk. But like I say, every attacker you pick, they all have their plus points and their negatives as to why to pick them for a team, for your fantasy Premier League team. Cody Gakpo, as an example, solid, knows how to get the job done, knows how to score the goals for Liverpool, and knows how to feed off the team. And I think I might be right in saying that he's down as a midfielder. If he sounds a forward, then that might be a bit different. But if he does get assists and goals, it could really work for him. Then you've got Ekatike, who has performed incredibly well this season and scored, brilliant goals. Seems to be feeding off the team really smoothly. Could that work for him? Absolutely, it could. And the same with Wirtz. They've been sort of like bouncing off each other. Yes, Wirtz hasn't been getting the assists, but it's been allowing Ekatike to play and get the goals. Isak, an incredible striker, but still very new to the squad. Still cannot fit things around. And then you got Salah. No longer the guarantee. I wonder if Salah needs to start thinking about, right, let's get assists for this team. Let's almost perform as a right winger. I don't know. It's hard to judge, hard to fathom. But again, I think the next couple of weeks will be fascinating to see how Liverpool set up so that you can even make a guess as to which players are going to play. So definitely probably take a step back for this one for Liverpool players, and see how things go. That's one to take week by week, because once Liverpool are connected and firing, they'll be hard to stop, and you can start picking players and knowing which players to pick. But for right now, bit of a risk. It'd be a gamble. And I tell you what, the first person that picks the high-performing and high-scoring Liverpool player, whether that be Ekatike or Gakpo or Wirtz or Isak or Salah, credit to you. You deserve the head start that you're going to get as a result of getting basically a cheap player and scoring really well. Now we come to West Ham Brentford, and it's interesting. We started this talking about Nottingham Forest losing Nuno Espirito Santo. West Ham have gained Nuno Espirito Santo, and this is now where we're going to start moving into the next few games, because I want to actually focus on this a little bit. And this is where we're going to start going into the transfers side of things. So let me just get into the transfers. We'll just switch on to the full screen so that you can see everything, because this is where I'm going to be making my decision. Because you see, the one player I'm thinking of bringing in is Jarrod Bowen from West Ham. Now, let me explain fully. Firstly, without looking at the next few matches, but then focusing on that, right? First things first, Nottingham Forest have lost Nuno Espirito Santo. West Ham have gained Nuno Espirito Santo. West Ham are going to be an incredibly organised team. They're going to start batting down the hatches and launching someone forward, almost like a Chris Wood, like having wingers that are performing well. West Ham are the team to watch. If you want that sort of wild card guide to pick and things like that, maybe start looking at West Ham now. This could be the surprise. And especially when I mention about the fact that the next few matches, because let's look at Jarrod Bowen, right? Have a look at those next few matches. Playing against Brentford, this will be the tester for them. If that goes well, they've got Leeds away, Newcastle at home, Burnley at home, Bournemouth away. And actually, if we were to maybe even look further, well, we have Liverpool afterwards, but can you see we're starting to look at in the next, what, 10 matches? Maybe more? There's two that are challenging ones in Man City and Liverpool. Maybe Manchester United as well. But West Ham, if they get it together against Brentford, could be worth looking at West Ham players. I can't believe I'm saying this, given the fact that they were basically the down and out by the looks of things. And here's the thing: look at Jarrod Bowen himself. I mean, ironically beating Nottingham Forest, but even when they've performed poorly, he has still got 9 points. He got 9 points against Nottingham Forest. He has this knack of scoring goals. Jarrod Bowen is the type of guy to be going for. And as a result, I'm not just watching him, I'm actually going to be going for him. But instead of who? You see, I'm going to have to take a striker out to bring in Jarrod Bowen. And I think, I might be right in saying, not a Chelsea player just yet. Chelsea are stuttering at the moment, but again, they're actually in a similar situation where, like West Ham, they've got some decent matches over the next sort of like 7 or 8 games. Not too bad. How's Arsenal looking? How's Gyökeres looking? Again, look at those fixtures. Yes, they've got Tottenham Hotspur, they've got Chelsea. Could be a bit more trickier for Arsenal, but at the end of the day, they are the top performing team right now. Still worth keeping an eye on. Sunderland? Ooh. Bit more of a challenge. They've got games against Chelsea. They've got games against Everton, and even though that's down as a 2, I think that's more of a challenge than people think. Game against Arsenal. This could be the beginning of the end of having Sunderland players. We've still got one more week of that. Weirdly, the player I'm going to take out is Gyökeres. I know that Arsenal are performing well, but they're back to focusing on midfielders and defenders. I don't know what's going on. I feel like Arsenal definitely needed a striker, but they're not playing to a striker's strengths. And we are in this weird situation where he's scored 3 goals. It's not great. So this is going to be my hot take, my big risk. We're going to take out Gyökeres. We're going to put in Jarrod Bowen. That is my pick. Now, the benefit is that it also gives me more in my budget. I had 6.2, it's now 7.5. That's going to be my pick. Like I say, Sunderland players are also players to keep an eye out for, right? No doubt about it. Sunderland players definitely are players to be keeping an eye out for taking them out. But right now, with 3 subs, you can try and work around that. So not too bad, right? So how are we going to play this? How are we going to play this? I'm going to make one pick that I'm going to do. I'm going to put Kelleher in goal. Now, the reason being, covers me. If Bowen performs poorly, there is a chance that Kelleher will at least get points. I think at the end of the day, Gabriel and Saka are going to be performing well. And honestly, the way things are looking, this is where, again, it starts to get really tricky. Who do you pick as captain? You've got Wirtz, you've got Saka, you've got Bowen, you've got Pedro, you've got Kudus, you've got Xavi. Xavi Simons, not the other Xavi. I genuinely wouldn't know who to pick. However, I'm going to say this, that if Arsenal do perform well, I'm going to give it to Saka. And you know what? I'm trusting Kudus as well. I can't work out which way around it's going to be, but I think Kudus and Saka are good shouts for the captaincy and everything like that. I'm going to have Wirtz as my first guy on the bench because I don't know if he's actually going to play. In fact, I might have him instead of Xavi Simons, just to give myself a little bit of cover, and everything like that. So if we're actually looking at what we're going to be reacting to on the Saturday, I mean, we still got some good headlines to react to. We've got Bournemouth players in the game. We've got Sunderland players in the game. There's going to be 2 matches that we're really going to be focused on in terms of our points, but we still got these other 3 to focus on. It's going to be a wild weekend. Really fascinating. And those are my picks. Those are my picks. How about yours, though? Are there any teams that you think we should be keeping an eye out for? Any players you think we should be keeping an eye out for? Any hot takes? Anyone that you think they're going to do well? Anyone you think they're going to do poorly despite what everyone's saying? I don't know. I'm not a genius. I've done all right, but I'm not a genius. But I'm going to give it a go and see how we get on from there. It's going to be fascinating weekend. We can start to get into the groove of things for another couple of weeks before another international break. Yeah, don't get me started on international breaks. A lot of players with a point to prove. A lot of players that teams with a point to prove. This could be a feisty weekend, and I'm here for it. So if you want to join us live on twitch.tv/ND Ninja on Saturday afternoon when we react to the 3 p.m. matches, or if you want to see the reviews on YouTube, either way, feel free to like, subscribe, all that sort of good stuff. We always appreciate it on this channel. And until then, guys, take